Hi folks, you're with Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this radio audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the propaganda campaign that the globalists are quite clearly coordinating and centrally scripting and arranging and stage managing in support of continued mass peasant immigration from the surplus basket case areas of the world, surplus population basket case areas of the world into the West. So the globalists are absolutely committed to continuing that and increasing it. And so whenever they encounter groundswells, quite obvious, and very well-founded groundswells of questions and opposition or criticism of this, then they instantly move into action with their very substantial, very well-oiled, very well-funded propaganda machine. So their intention is to counter the opposition to mass migration. Now, I got to, these things can start off a little bit under the radar, I guess, because the globalists control so many of the NGOs and the media and governments and public service institutions that they can all move in unison, in coordination, and it's difficult to see what's going on until it kind of hits the street, as it were. So I was just a few days ago, I was in a university part of town. If ever you want to see what the globalists are up to, just walk around an area just near to or within the grounds of a university, and you see all the posters and all the things that are up, notice boards or anything like that. Now, if you're in there's a village or a shopping area or something like that, cafes next to where the university is, and you'll see that propaganda plastered everywhere. And they're certainly going hard at it in terms of supporting mass migration. Now, when I saw a few of these posters, there was a certain amount of narrative continuity within these range of posters and some of the stuff I'd seen online. So clearly it was centrally organized and centrally scripted. And, there was a downtown central propaganda, globalist propaganda unit. They decided on the narrative, the talking points, and they were sending the people were fanning out all over the Western world. And what they're doing this time, or certainly the examples I've seen, what the globalist propaganda machine is doing this time is they're trying to depict themselves as the sensible, moderate middle ground. So they're only just pointing out, why mass migration is a good thing. It's not a big deal. Sure, the far right says it's a problem, but it's not really a problem. Hey, what's the big deal? Everyone take a chill pill and just settle down. Don't listen to what those Nazis say. It's what's happening is perfectly normal. The mass migration, that is perfectly natural. It's humanitarian. It's something good people anywhere and everywhere will do and support. It's just the only problem we've got is the far right. And that's the way they're sort of playing the propaganda. So they've sort of ditched quite a lot of the hysterical, screaming, screaming black mother with, lesbian daughter in pink or something. They're ditching some of the more hysterical side of it and going for, hey, we're just the moderate one. We're the people in this, and we're the reasonable ones. And every time something's proposed that would help the situation, it's blocked and stopped by the far right. So that's the line that now, just looking at, they've had some talks and they've got speakers going around the universities and doing talks in town halls, and the NGOs are out there, doing their stuff. Again, all controlled by the globalists and all pushing the same talking points, all pretending to be independent and reasonable, but they're nothing of the sort. So I got online, had a look at a few of these talks that have been recorded and posted online, and other sort of attempts at documentary type delivery of the propaganda. And again, it's the same talking points and the same thing. So I just want to go over that now and just give some idea of what they're up to now. They claim they start off by, and here's one I'm just looking at now. They start off by saying, "Hey, I may be a little tiny bit biased towards migration because it's quite clearly a very good thing, and any country that wants to remain economically competitive in the world has to accept mass migration. But look, I don't want to push this on you. I'm going to be very, very middle of the road, very centrist here, and just state the facts, not like the far right, which tells you all the lies. No, I'm going to state the facts." So that's the sort of the direction they take. Now, this sort of very clearly and obviously propaganda. I mean, when they're pushing it to college kids and the like, that they don't really have to worry about facts. They can just sort of spin away at whatever yarn they want to push. Now, it's got sort of a fatal flaw. They're assuming that all people who move from these overpopulated areas, they're just in search of a better life. What's wrong with that? They just want a better life for their little children, their little baby children. They just want a better life. Who's got a problem with that? Only Nazi. In the little thing, quick cut to Hitler, and that's it. So that's it. So if you're against people having a better life, then you're Hitler. So that's it. So suddenly we're supposed to believe that these illiterate peasants living in these rural villages, living hand to mouth in farming communities, just suddenly get it one day. You know what? I want a better life, and I'm going to go to Western Europe to get it. Now, where do the people get the money from to do this? Where do they get the resources? How are they able to travel those vast distances? Those aren't questions that are answered, and nor are they asked, by the way. So we're supposed to believe, and this is flaw number one in the logic they're presenting, that millions upon millions of people in the poorest areas of the world just suddenly get up at the same time and go, "Hey, I want a better life." And this is even beyond their capacity to comprehend. Remember, these are illiterate peasants. Many have an IQ of 70 or 80. So they're not sitting down reasoning through, you know what, I've considered the economic possibilities and I've looked at the capitalist system and I've decided, I mean, that's bullshit. That doesn't happen. Now, the second claim is that because they want a better life, they must therefore be legitimate refugees. And the only people that would prevent refugees from coming to the rich West is, again, it's the Nazis. So that's the second sort of piece of logic they put forward. Just in search of a better life, they therefore are all legitimate refugees. But what if they're not refugees? Well, if you question that they're refugees, that means you're not being humanitarian. That means you're denying their humanity. And again, only Nazis do that. So you can't even check or validate their claims of being refugees. Now, once these people are on the move, then it's a humanitarian, large numbers of third world peasants are on the move. It's then a humanitarian crisis where the only humane response is to take them into the West. Well, why don't you just send them back to where they came from? Why is that? So they then present this as, once these people arrive in large numbers or are on the move in large numbers, that is now a humanitarian crisis, which must be solved by the Western countries. Now, the next sort of logic that they present is, and they do two things. Once they say, look, it's hugely expensive, and they cited in this, just the one that I'm looking at just a moment ago, was that Germany had spent something over 20 to 25 billion US dollars to integrate 1.5 million plus immigrants to Germany, mass immigrants, alleged refugees and whatever. And they're saying, well, so they concede it is very expensive, but they then say, well, look, it's a humanitarian crisis, and the West is rich, and a lot of those riches came from exploiting these poor countries. Well, they're poor. So it's really the West's fault that these poor people exist in the world, because if the West had shared all the wealth with the poor people, then they wouldn't be poor, they wouldn't want to move, and therefore it's still really the West's moral responsibility to pay for all this. Even though it is very expensive, they're morally required to pay for it. Why? Well, that isn't explained. So this is the effective logic, what the effective, the actual logic they apply to this. And I'll come back and go through some of this. Now, I just want to sort of point out over the last 10 years, the Australian, adult Australian citizens, this would affect children as well, has become in hard dollar terms 18% poorer over the last just 10 years due to mass migration. Now, when we add in the climate change type legislation that's made energy, vastly more expensive than it should be, then we can see that Australians are 22 to 23% poorer just over the last 10 years due to mass migration and climate change. So becoming much poorer. So it's not simply an issue of you're an ass and you don't like mass migration or you don't like brown and black peasants and so on. It's got nothing to do with that. Local citizens are becoming poorer. They're being denied more and more services because the services are being consumed by people who shouldn't be in the West. Now, Australia doesn't have a huge problem. It's got a problem with Indian visa overstays and that sort of thing, but it doesn't have a huge problem with masses of boat people arriving on the shore. So it's that. But what Australia's done since they've stopped the legal immigration is they've lowered the bar for migration. So anybody who's alive is able to become migrate to Australia, and so the bar's been lowered. So if you're an illiterate peasant from the third world who's got an IQ of 80 and then you're still good to go as a migrant, which of course is absurd. Now, the concession that even the Australian government makes quietly, they don't publicise it, is that only between 3 and 5% of the migrant intake is actually of any economic benefit to the country. That speaks good English, has qualifications that are recognised, has relevant experiences needed in the economy and qualifications. So a very small number. So it's close to 500,000 were brought in last year in Australia, and so you're looking at somewhere around 15 to 20,000. Only 15 to 20,000 of those people are actually of any use economically. The rest are just fucking dead wood and consuming vast resources without contributing anything. So that's the narrative that they're spinning. So whenever they hit a roadblock with difficult to accept numbers, they then just flip the script to suddenly it's a humanitarian crisis and there's a moral responsibility, and then they go on. Now, in terms of economic competitiveness, the claim that the West can only be economically competitive if it accepts masses of illiterate brown and black peasants is just beyond absurd. But this is the claim that's constantly made. For the West to remain economically competitive, they have to bring these peasants in. Okay, well, let's explore that then. Well, if that's the case, then Africa would be incredibly rich and competitive because they've got gazillions of peasants there. Why aren't they incredible? If having lots of illiterate peasants is the key to economic competitiveness, which is what's being claimed, then wouldn't Africa be super? I mean, they'd be a juggernaut of economic. They'd be an economic powerhouse that unlike whatever has ever been seen in the history of humankind, because they've got a fuckload of peasants there. What about India? I mean, India's got something like 900 million poor peasants there. So they'd be an economic powerhouse, surely, if that were the case. No. So obviously having, that's an absurd claim. Having lots of illiterate brown and black peasants, low IQ at that, that's not the key to economic fucking competitiveness. Or maybe in a perverse way, it is like the West can create jobs, whereas Africa can't. But when you put people in 20 or 30 to a 2-bedroom apartment and then pay them shit money to do shit jobs, maybe that's the key to competitiveness. Maybe that's what they mean. The people doing these propaganda things have themselves never had jobs. All they've ever done has been NGO activists. So they've never had jobs or had to accept responsibility for what they do or what they propose or decisions they make. So The next thing is the claim to be refugees. Now, anybody who decides that, according to these people, anyone decides they want to have a better life is automatically becomes a refugee. So an economic refugee or a climate refugee or any of the million other refugee categories they've invented or pull out of their ass. So that's not a qualification for being a fucking refugee. And if you are a refugee, then you go to the nearest safe country. You don't travel 10,000 miles, or more to go to a rich white country. You go to the nearest country where you're not in danger, or where you can get something to eat. And there are numerous refugee camps around the place. So that one falls flat. Again, they flip the script to as soon as difficult questions arrive, then suddenly it's the humanitarian issues. That's a constant sort of device they use to skirt around any unpleasant or difficult to explain realities. Oh, it's a humanitarian crisis. Are you going to deny that little child something to eat? You fucking damn Nazi fascist Hitler. They keep on going down that same path. Now, another thing that they refuse to accept or concede or mention is the massive NGO globalist infrastructure to move these people around. So an illiterate peasant living in a village hand to mouth with nothing, they've got an IQ of 80, they're illiterate in their own language, and they suddenly get up and say, I want a better life. And they haven't got a cent penny to their name. How do they manage to move 10,000 miles across the world? Eat, drink, clothe themselves, find shelter, and arrive in good, healthy condition at the other end. How do they manage to do that? They'd just be a bedraggled bag of bones if they were doing it on their own, assuming they even made it, assuming they even attempted. So none of this massive infrastructure to move these people around is to encourage them to make the journey, and the agitators that are on the ground, and also the infrastructure. None of this is conceded in these documents. How does a penniless peasant, an illiterate peasant, low IQ peasant in a rural village, how do they manage to travel 10,000 miles and arrive at the other end in fit condition, with all the talking points of the lies to tell immigration officials, I'm a refugee and I'm escaping, oppression? And how do they do that if they're penniless, illiterate peasants? They couldn't do it. There is just no way they could do it. So they don't concede this. What they do concede is that every sort of place the peasant goes, this mass migration peasant goes, that spot is then a humanitarian crisis. So the only moral thing to do is to feed, clothe them, give them water, give them shelter, and help them get to them, because that's what they want to do, and that's what good moral humanitarian people do. So they try and paint that whole thing as just it's just a humanitarian thing, no big deal. Let's move on to the next step. No. Wait a minute. How much money is spent, and how many activist groups are involved in moving these people around? And these people would never make these journeys without this help. They wouldn't even dream of attempting it unless they had this massive help and assistance. So this colossal logistical machine. So they don't concede this, and none of the material certainly that I've seen concedes that logistical machine even exists. Now they will concede that people smugglers exist. They'll concede that, but they'll say that the only reason these people smugglers exist, and this is in the propaganda, is because these evil white fascist Nazi Western countries won't just let anyone come in who wants to come in whenever they want to come in any amount of numbers. If they would just do that, if there were no borders, no requirements, no bar of competence or qualification, if they had nothing at all, you can just walk across the border at any time you want for any reason. If they had that, then people smugglers wouldn't be needed. In fact, what should happen is if people from wherever, rural Pakistan want to come to England, for example, all the transport facilities and everything should be paid for, so these people can just be flown in or brought in on a boat and delivered in. That's what should happen. Then they wouldn't need to use the people smugglers, because the taxpayer in those countries would be funding it. So that would cut out the people smuggling. That's what has to happen. So again, they sort of avoid the reality that anyone anywhere in the world. And I just want to give you an idea of sort of how scary that is. I've met a number of Indians now, and I went to a this talk in actually not far away from where I live, and this Indian lady came along, and she gave one of the scariest speeches I think I've ever heard. She got up and said, from the time I was a little girl, and the time I can remember, the only thing I ever wanted to do was to move to a rich white country. Everyone I know, everyone in the village, every other girlfriend that I have, every other person that I know in India has the same sentiment. We all want to go to a rich white country. And now, if you look at the amount of, India is a very poor country. If you look at the amount of peasants in India, this is rural illiterate peasants, you're looking at, there's close to 900 million. Some people say even a billion plus. Remember, the total population of India is 1.4 billion. So you've got 900 million plus people in India that all want to fucking move to a nice white, rich, not the poor white countries like, fucking Romania or something, but they want to move to the rich white countries in Germany and, Australia, Canada, and all over the US and so on. So that's the number of people that want to get out. Now, if you add to that, there's over something between 200 and 300 million people in Africa that want to get out of Africa. There's another 200 plus million want to come out of Asia. So you've got at least absolute fucking bare bones minimum, 1.5 to 2 billion people in the world that all want to move to the West. Now, if you move, for example, if you move those people to the West today, our standard of living would drop by 3/4. That's the effect of it, and it would have a stunning effect on. Now, again, coming back to the numbers I mentioned earlier on in Australia, if you add the cost of mass migration in terms of increasing rents, things like that, if you add the cost of mass migration onto cost of living, access to service, it's costing each Australian person 22% to 23%, depending on your numbers. But reduction in standard of living, that's you're pushing $10,000 a year reduced purchasing power just over the last 10 years. That's the effect of it. And remember, our government's completely controlled by the globalists are pushing this on us. So we're absolutely being squeezed. Our standard of living is going through the fucking floor as it is. And so mass migration achieves and produces and creates nothing for the West. And if they, migration, sure, and I got no problem with migration. You qualified people, you've got the experience, that's needed in the economy, fine, come in. But those numbers will always be very small. So as long as there's a bar of competence is maintained, immigration numbers will always be small. And so this concern the globalists have that their mass migration and white replacement is going to be, frustrated, Trump and Marine Le Pen in France, AFD in Germany, all this sort of thing. It's obviously causing them to panic. And so they're pushing the most insane and ridiculous propaganda in response, but trying to pretend that it's somehow centrist and sensible and reasonable, that the only unreasonable people in this whole debate is the far right. Now, let's have a look at some of the far right. I mean, there's a far right, or supposedly far, they're not far right, politician in Australia, and the politician has got very sensible that migrants to Australia must be able to speak good English, and they must have some sort of qualifications that are recognised. They must have relevant job experience. And they must be married with younger children and these sort of things. Now, what's wrong with that? That seems to be eminently sensible. Those people integrate almost seamlessly. They get straight off the plane and walk into a job and contribute straight away and pay taxes. Nothing wrong with that at all. That seems to be very moderate. But that person is denounced as being a far right nah-zee. Why? Well, because they're just not humanitarian enough. Why can't we bring in millions of illiterate third world black, brown peasants? And if you're against that, then you're a far right fucking Nazi. So that's the counter argument. But the sensible discussions are we should bring people in that can contribute straight away, or in the almost immediate term, contribute straight away and can seamlessly integrate into the economy. And if all those people were black and brown, I wouldn't care. That's fine with me. But those are the sort of people that we should be, in any Western country, should be attracting. And this mass migration of literate peasants is insane. Now, some of the other statistics they play around there, for example, they say that, well, 70% of the migration to England isn't really migration. It's just people attending universities to students. So that's not a problem because they all go home again, but they don't go home again. And they're not students in any sort of recognised sense. The wealthy ones come but they're not getting rigorous degrees. They're just the rich Indians, the Brahmins. Hey, we've paid you for that fucking degree. Don't think we have to also pass tests or have to go through examinations. No. We gave you that $100,000 and you will give us the fucking degree, and that's how it is. So you get almost zero rigor degrees from the richer Indians and Asians and so on. But then you get the bullshit courses in nail, beautician courses, painting nails or typing colleges or things like that. And there are massive scams, dishwashing training, and there are massive scams going over and supposed training courses there or educational courses where they're just nothing more than labour hire scam fronts. So the majority of this, so 70% of students, no, it's not. There's hardly any fucking students in that lot. So the various statistics they use are very cherry picked and selected, especially to give the impression, there's no problem here, nothing to see here at all. But what we're facing with the mass migration is a colossal mass movement of illiterate brown and black peasants from the surplus population areas of the world into the West, and it's causing endless problems. And the local white populations are being displaced by it. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.